Lingad, a world surrounded by a wall. This wall protects and nurtures this land. This wall is seen as God, and in this world there are two countries divided. One side honors wisdom as the empire, one side honors bravery as the republic. On a fateful day, the supreme fortune teller of the republic, Subai, saw an omen about the sign of the phoenix falling down. The location was believed to be near the border of the empire. Subai told the commander Ren to go ask for permission from the king to capture that place. However, General Kai took the initiative to go into battle before the order, aiming to seize that place because he knew the sign of the phoenix must be very valuable. Kai brought his troops just in time as the treasure fell. After opening it, he discovered there were many rings inside. Their function would be clear later. Just as he was about to take it back, the empire's people had come to steal the treasure. Subai wasn't worried because he believed Kai would handle it. Kai called for someone to get him one from that pile of treasure. What they had just obtained were rings that could help the wearer get a set of armor. The others planned to fight 4 against 1, but Kai believed that robots represent each person's soul, and those monochrome bunch wouldn't stand a chance against him. Kai tossed them all into the air and rushed in to finish them all in one move. Suddenly, another sign appeared nearby, but it fell into an area not under their sovereignty. Subai wanted Kai to return while he would go get the second sign himself. He would take responsibility if the king punished them. The place where the sign would fall was the territory of a remote village. The people there were mostly cowboys and had to live in the high mountains all year round. This village wasn't well off either, mainly living by gathering and hunting, but animals were scarce, causing them to live in poverty. Subai had gone with Ren to where the sign would fall. The sign had fallen straight into that poor village. The villagers knew this was a treasure from heaven, and all hoped there would be food inside. Ren and Subai had approached the village and saw them heating up the sign. A girl discovered it wasn't food and spoke up, and from inside a young man came out and kicked the mouth of the guy who was cooking. The kids thought he was food and ran to bite him, while Subai was surprised that inside the sign was a human. That night, the whole village asked the young man his name, but he couldn't remember. The only thing he remembered was that he came from the other side of the wall. The villagers found it ridiculous because this world was contained entirely within the wall, but the protagonist ignored them and turned his back to walk towards the wall to cross it. Subai for the first time thought about the possibility of life outside the wall, because until now their knowledge had always been molded by the wall, and anything that couldn't be explained was attributed to the divine nature of the wall. Suddenly a thief came looking for the treasure from heaven. The villagers all pointed at the protagonist, but he didn't believe a naked guy like him could be the treasure. The protagonist tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He started destroying the village, forcing the blue-haired girl to go get her father's relic, which was a shape-shifting ring. She was the sheriff, so she had to take responsibility for protecting the village. She put it on and transformed, which confused the protagonist. The village scholar told him that the ring helps connect the wearer with their ideals and beliefs, thus creating armor to fight. The blue-haired girl's belief gave her the ability to resist attacks, but the thief still caught her because his belief was that the more the enemy ran, the stronger he became. The villagers wanted the protagonist to do something to help the blue-haired girl, because if the armor was destroyed, the user would also die. He then ran to his iron box and rummaged through it to find a ring. He was confident he was strong enough to use this and put it on. He successfully transformed into an awesome, overpowered robot. He went in to fight instead and lured the thief to chase him down the mountain. When the thief rushed to attack, the protagonist's body softened like slime, but when it reformed, he could still fight. He hadn't figured out what his belief was but kept kicking the thief until his ring broke and forced him to run away. Subai found him and saw that he had lasted so long, which was a miracle because normal people would be exhausted after just 1 to 2 hours. Subai asked him about outside the wall, but he couldn't remember what was out there. For the people here, they believe everything is inside the wall, so few would believe him. He was then confused by Subai's explanation and gave him a hit, causing Ren to rush in to attack him. Subai stopped it, and he seemed to find Arrow very interesting. He was willing to help him get out of the wall, but would need him to stay here for a few days. The villagers were now checking if the blue-haired girl was okay, but she wanted to go find Arrow. Suddenly, he was thrown back here and was sleeping. Subai and Ren had returned, and Ren wanted Subai to keep quiet about Arrow and the outside of the wall if he didn't want to go to court. Both met Kai again, and he asked about the second treasure, to which Subai said he would explain later. That morning, Arrow had integrated into the village. The children tried to play with him. The sheriff was known as Atli. She had given him these clothes, which were made by a young man named Bit, the village tailor. Arrow praised the clothes, but Bit wanted Arrow to fix his house. He made a temporary house for him and promised to make it bigger if he had materials. The girl considered the village hunter also came. She was Elsha. She showed distrust towards Arrow and told him to follow her. She took him hunting and showed him what their village was like. Their village was very small and poor, and they couldn't migrate anywhere else due to the war between the two big countries. If he stayed here, it would only bring more danger to the village. He knew they were both trying to drive him away, so he didn't blame them. Bit only gave him some food, and that was all they could give him. Meanwhile, Subai had forged the king's seal to go with Ren to secret places to find out the truth about this world. He also realized that the thief who attacked the village was from the Empire. The thief from before had reported back about his defeat, but only the ring was broken while he was unharmed. The princess of this place wanted to hear more about it, because she was a peace-loving person, and if there was a way to prevent bloodshed, she very much wanted to know, so she asked the courtiers to find Arrow for her. They then called the president of the small country, where the village was settled, to request them to hand over Arrow if possible. That evening, the village saw quite a few animals being brought back, surely hunted by Arrow to repay them. Suddenly, soldiers came demanding to search the village for Arrow, but he wasn't here, so the president ordered to wipe out the whole village. They started transforming and shooting, forcing Atli to go into battle to protect the village. Elsha ran to Arrow's iron box to see if there were any more rings. Atli was being beaten while Elsha found another ring and transformed. But as soon as she landed, she fell straight into a hole. Bit tried to run away and found Arrow sleeping in the well. He went down there to sleep in the cool because he had promised Subai he wouldn't leave. He then transformed and rushed out to fight the commander. Subai had now reached the forbidden area and started studying the ancient texts preserved there. Elsha heard a voice, and it helped her connect with the armor. Arrow had repeatedly kicked the commander and successfully defeated him. Once again, the ring was broken, but the person survived. After reading, Subai knew Arrow was a guardian from outside the wall, and once he truly wakes up and remembers everything, the world would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Elsha had gotten out of the hole and even pulled out a giant ship. The king of the Republic had distributed the newly acquired rings to the soldiers, and they all looked the same. The king then asked Kai about the second treasure and requested him to tell Subai to report as soon as possible. After Elsha pulled her leg out of the ship, it suddenly stopped and fell. Kai then heard about the person in the second treasure and about the ship capable of destroying the world that he had just investigated. Kai wanted Subai to be less reckless because the Emperor was very scary and Subai was also a thorn in many people's eyes. Subai promised to investigate thoroughly before reporting to the king because everyone knew how scary the king was. The whole village was now severely destroyed and no longer habitable. Arrow wanted to use this ship to go outside the wall, and only Elsha could move it. He then fell asleep while Bit had discussed something with the commander. When Arrow woke up, he saw that the villagers had turned against him and even took away his transformation ring. They said that if they just handed him and this thing over to the president, they would be able to live in peace. That night, Atli came and forced Bit to release Arrow because he had saved their lives twice. But Elsha wanted Atli to put down her gun because the army would only take him away, not execute him. Arrow also told Atli to leave him be. He would face them rather than run away and affect the village. The next day, Elsha transformed into a robot to pilot the ship and bring all the villagers and Arrow to hand over to the president. Bit realized he was disliked by Atli and felt quite sad. When they met the president and handed over Arrow, he told them to go through this mountain pass to the new settlement. Everyone believed him completely and boarded the ship to continue. Bit asked to join the army because he was disliked. As the whole village was flying through the mountain pass, Bit was tricked into firing the cannons. A series of cannons were fired to bury the entire ship under earth and rocks, because the president didn't want to expose the ship to the two countries as he would be forced to hand it over, and if he handed it to one side, the other wouldn't let it go. Bit realized he had been tricked, So he stole the ring from the president and threw it to Arrow. He broke out of the cage and took it away. Arrow had enlightened Elsha, and she decided to fly into the sky once again. The commander asked for a ring to chase after them and clung to the ship. Arrow was about to join the fight when Atli went into battle once again. She had tied up the guy, but he shook violently and shot her in the mouth. She changed her belief and reversed the bullet back to him, letting Arrow finish him off. The village then forced the president and the army not to touch them anymore, but he asked the whole village to leave this country. The village had been abandoned for a long time, so they would consider this ship as their home, and for now, they would aim for the wall to see if Arrow was telling the truth. If true, they would choose to settle outside the wall. Subai had now reported back to the king and asked to personally handle the ship and Arrow. Years ago, Kai and Subai were both children sold by the village to the government. The children were thrown down a well like animals, which made Kai very angry. He broke the handcuffs himself and wanted to rise up to take this country. So Subai and Kai had nurtured a dream of changing this entire country. And the reason Subai wanted to handle Arrow was because if he could achieve great merit, there would be no one who could hinder both of them from achieving their dream. He didn't want Kai to follow because he was afraid others would say he was stealing Kai's merits. Both were determined to realize their dream. Meanwhile, a group of mercenaries had arrived at the neutral area between the two countries and attacked the Empire's plantation. Arrow's group was now considering having the ship follow the neutral path to the wall, to avoid conflict with the two countries. Suddenly, soldiers from the Republic appeared to attack them. They threw in a ball and let Arrow's group meet the king. He was determined to wipe out this ship, and they would have no chance to negotiate. As soon as he finished speaking, guns were fired. The doctor told them to hide temporarily in the nearby merchant city. Atli would lead the way, Elsha would pilot the ship, and Arrow would defend. Subai had sent the 4 mercenaries from earlier into battle. The 4 put on rings and rushed out to spray some kind of smoke that prevented the ship from flying anymore. Subai had tried their method of countering flying ships on this one, and unexpectedly it worked. The ship had stopped, forcing Arrow and Atli to come down to fight. Subai and Ren had come to greet Arrow. Previously, Subai helped him because he thought he would be useful, but now it's different. Arrow wanted to negotiate with Subai but failed, making him unsure now whether Subai was a friend or foe. The 4 told him that Subai had instructed them to grind him into powder. They also introduced themselves clearly before starting to fight. They all wanted him to fight well so they could earn more money. Actually, Subai was doing this to test Arrow's strength. Of course, he wouldn't go easy on him, but information was the most valuable thing Subai had to grasp. On the Empire's side, they heard that the border was attacked but not invaded. Moreover, they had photos of the ship, so they suspected the president was rebelling. Atli was now pulled down to the ground by one guy. Arrow was attacked by the remaining 3 using wind, water, and fire. Elsha couldn't stay on the ship forever, so she also separated to fight. As soon as she joined forces with Atli, she was attacked by the water user. Arrow was criticized by them as incompetent and having nothing but luck. So he showed them why he was the protagonist, suddenly learning the ability to split into 4 bodies. When the numbers were even, nothing could trouble him. Subai explained that he had this ability because he didn't have a specific belief. Thus his power was limitless, meaning the prophecy about the world's end was true. The Republic soldiers then activated their armor simultaneously, but Subai pressed a button and caused all the rings to break. He then locked Ren in the car and went to Arrow to surrender. He no longer liked serving the Republic and wanted to join Arrow's group. He was also interested in the outside of the wall and needed Ren and the soldiers to return to report to the king that he had rebelled. Ren didn't accept, but now it was either return or die. Everyone went back while Subai was still suspected and had guns pointed at him. The village then asked Subai about why the ship couldn't fly anymore. Subai explained that under the ground there were metal veins that created a repulsive force with the ship, allowing it to float and fly in the sky. The substance sprayed earlier caused the repulsive force to disappear and would wear off after an hour. Everyone still didn't trust Subai because they had been tricked before. They wanted Subai to prove himself in the way Arrow had done. Ren had now returned and informed Kai about Subai's betrayal, though he didn't know why. Subai was now led to the ship's control room. 10 years ago, Subai and Kai were still slaves and were sent with soldiers to hunt for treasure from heaven. Subai had calculated the angle of fall and led Kai to retrieve it. They were attacked by rebellious soldiers and Kai handled them all by himself. The emperor and the king's close courtier came. The courtier thought both were unworthy to appear before the emperor and demanded execution. But Subai used his hand to protect Kai and argued that both had achieved merit. The king also respected both for this feat and allowed them into the army. Subai now instructed the doctor on how to use this ship. Things like the control panel, lights, or navigation were all explained by Subai. Suddenly Elsha reported that an enemy had appeared, and only one person. Subai knew who was confronting them. Kai had activated the transformation ring and stopped the entire ship. Subai said Kai was as strong as 1,000 soldiers, but they were still careless and Kai used one move to completely stop the ship. The whole ship shook while Kai rushed up to deal with Elsha to drag Subai out. Elsha had to remove her bracelet to avoid losing her life and Arrow decided he had to join the battle too. Subai turned on the speaker and announced that he had joined Arrow's side. He believed the Republic was a sinking ship and he needed to find another one. His dream had now changed from Kai's. Arrow had also come face to face with Kai and transformed. Kai activated his fire sword to attack, but he wasn't hurt. However, he spun the sword and threw Arrow away. He split into multiple bodies and rushed to attack and approached him, but he fired a shock wave from his body causing Arrow to fall. Atli had run out to help Arrow. The village chief thought this was the fault of Subai and Arrow for dragging them into this situation. But now, even if they left, they would still be in trouble because both countries saw this battleship as a danger. Now the only way they could survive was to fight. He had a way to help them escape the current situation and needed the doctor to follow his instructions. Subai then went outside and asked everyone to remove their armor to talk. Arrow didn't expect Kai to be so strong, and now their only option was to trust Subai. Subai went to negotiate with Kai and was reprimanded by Kai for his selfish nature in betraying their promise. He showed the scar to remind Subai. 5 years ago, when Kai was given the transformation ring, he was the only one different, so he was promoted to general, while Subai also tried to become the chief astrologer. Both had promised to change this country, and Kai had cut this scar to help him remember Subai's kindness. But now Subai had healed and had no scar. He no longer wanted to change the country, but wanted to change the whole world. The reason he chose Arrow despite him being weaker than Kai was because Arrow had more potential than Kai. Kai then drew his sword to fight, but Bit pointed a gun at him. However, Kai just turned around, knocked the gun away, and gave Bit a painful hit. But Arrow came back to fight. He fired a smoke screen to put on the ring again and transform. Kai wanted to fight, but Subai had told the doctor to fire the cannon. It could reach as far as the palace, and it took until the second shot for Kai to reluctantly return. Arrow thought Kai was Subai's best friend but couldn't understand his wishes. But now Kai saw Subai as his biggest enemy, so he would never stop trying to take Subai down. Subai still had the scar but only stuck it on to cover it up. Subai saw that the doctor had acted very well. Earlier, they had only fired blank shots, and the explosion was set up by Subai in the capital beforehand and triggered at the right moment. That was the only way to drive Kai back. That night, the king heard that Kai had failed, so he would discipline Kai for a while. Ren no longer saw Subai as her master, so Kai took her in. The next morning, Elsha was a bit tired after flying continuously for 3 hours. Subai wanted to find a way for her to rest, but Bit didn't trust him, so Arrow let him be Subai's master. Subai used his intelligence to confuse Bit and make him give up. He activated the flying ability so Elsha could rest and asked the doctor to check on her. They noticed Elsha was fine and the ship could still fly until something stopped it. He had used Elsha's residual energy to let the ship float on its own without steering. The village chief wanted them to be quiet so Elsha could rest. So then they went to tour the ship. The ship was very spacious and enough for hundreds of people to live comfortably. Moreover, this place was more convenient and modern than their previous life, and the weapons on this ship were much better than their old guns. Kai was now being punished by being pressed under heavy rocks for failing the mission. Kai also saw this as an exercise to increase his strength and self-belief. The minister came to find him and told him that the emperor had set out to suppress the rebels, so now the courtier was the highest authority. As for Ren, she would receive punishment after 3 days, and for the next 3 days she was free to do anything necessary. Meanwhile, the ship had stopped for people to go out and find food. Arrow's group was drawing a route to move, and they would pass through a self-governing area of the lords. This place was ruled by lords, so security seemed to be looser, so they might be able to pass through more easily. Atli then announced that food was enough, so they continued on their way. That afternoon, the group had passed through the territory of a lord and was blocked by a robot. They thought this person was as strong as Kai, but Arrow rushed out to save them. The group then discovered this person was a teenage boy. Seeing that he looked hungry, the group gave him food and even took him home. The boy then told his other friends that this group was good people because they had given them food. The boy then told about the situation there. They were treated like animals. Some had been turned into vegetables after being taken for experiments at the Lord's place, thinking they would have food and shelter, but being turned into experimental subjects. 2 people in the group stole transformation rings and destroyed the research area to escape and save others. The kids wanted Arrow to help them. He allowed them to follow the group, but they wanted to stay and protect this place. Suddenly, the Lord came to cause trouble, so Arrow rushed out and cleaned up in just a few moves. He then chased them away and gave the kids dinner. He had found the blue-haired boy, and he was completely pessimistic about himself and hoped Arrow could stay here to protect them, but he just turned away. He then went with Bit and Subai to the Lord's place. Near dawn, all 3 along with the Lord's people returned to attack the kids' farm. He said he turned against them to get a map of this area to advance to the wall. The village chief also thought Arrow would soon truly betray them. Subai had told the Lord to bring out the transformation rings. The children noticed, and the blue-haired boy decided not to be weak anymore and rushed out to fight. The boy released smoke and rushed to punch Arrow, while Subai flashed a light for the children to come and take the rings. They were able to transform and overwhelm the Lord, and Arrow also stopped fighting. Subai had memorized the map, so the Lord could be considered tricked. So Subai had helped the children get weapons for self-defense, while also helping them become stronger to face those who dare threaten this common home. The group then continued their journey, and Subai thought Arrow was also clever to keep his mouth shut, but he saw himself as the one with the greatest merit for coming up with this plan. Arrow's group then noticed an army chasing them, but this army wouldn't be foolish enough to attack them near the wall intersecting with the neutral zone because it was taboo. However, the king of the Republic would be ready to attack them even if it was against the law, so they would have to quickly bring down the wall and leave first. Suddenly, the kids came running to report that half of the villagers and the village chief wanted to leave, because their belief was that if they brought down the wall, they would be cursed. They had lived their whole lives inside and now couldn't live life outside it, but the other half was still ready to go find a better place. The Lord had reported back to the princess, but she was angry at him for daring to experiment on the children. She turned away crying, and as he was leaving, he thought the princess was too weak. The price was that the captain of the cavalry took one of his hands for making the princess cry. She then heard 2 courtiers questioning her, but she had her own way of thinking and stance, and she was also ready to go and eliminate the ship that was troubling them. Meanwhile, Arrow's group had reached the wall and prepared to break it. He had transformed into a robot and launched an attack, but it didn't work at all. Atli also had to help, but it had no effect. Subai also didn't know the reason because no one had ever experimented on this wall before. Meanwhile, Ren was trying to find all the information Subai had left behind and discovered the bomb he had planted in the palace. From there, the king's courtier also soon learned that Subai had planted a bomb and tricked them before, but he still didn't let the commander here attack because of the neutrality treaty. Subai had now figured out how to use the ship's cannon and fired at the wall, but it still didn't work at all. Suddenly, the wall began to grow 2 tentacles or something and blew them back towards the Republic. The commander took advantage of this and ordered his troops to attack. He was the general of the Northern Republic and would bring the heads of Arrow and Subai back to the king. He rushed up and pulled Arrow down from the ship to fight. Atli tried to resist, but it was useless. But he still couldn't attack Arrow's slime-like body, so he had to have people release gas to eliminate the repulsive force to prevent the ship from leaving. Elsha had to stay there as Subai said, so Atli had to return to the ship to defend. The commander was about to use a special move when a robot flew from somewhere and stole his weapon. That person was the female commander of the Empire side. He thought she was violating the territory, but in the rules only violations on the ground were prohibited, and she was flying so it didn't count. Subai revealed that the Empire had kept the secret about flying robots to circumvent the law, so she was right. Subai also redirected the exhaust to blow all the gas that eliminated the repulsive force away from the ship. The commander had helped Arrow's group get out of the Republic's jurisdiction and back to the neutral zone. Thanks to that, the general couldn't advance anymore and had to retreat. She then also asked permission to invite the whole group to meet the princess as guests. Arrow refused and wanted to stay to deal with the wall, even though he knew that no matter what he did it wouldn't work, and even the Empire, which emphasized knowledge, might be able to find a way. But Arrow still refused. The commander decided to take the whole group to the princess and come back to persuade Arrow later. Meanwhile, Ren and Kai were also about to be free and vowed to make Subai taste bitterness. The group was then informed by the commander about the Empire, a place ruled by 6 supreme beings. Above all was the princess, a peace-loving person ready to help with their idea of crossing the wall. They then arrived at the imperial capital, and since this place was not belligerent, they didn't have to worry. Atli still wanted to go meet Arrow, but Elsha needed her by her side at this time. Arrow was still punching the wall very actively, and the doctor stayed with him. The whole group had now reached the princess's palace. The female commander led them to the dining table that the princess had prepared for them. The villagers rushed in to eat, while Atli and Elsha were led to the bathroom and met the princess there. They had a small diplomatic conversation there, and the princess was ready to provide accommodation for all the people, as long as they lived peacefully together. She then went out and hoped that the female captain would soon bring Arrow back here. Arrow was now having dinner with the doctor and sharing some thoughts with him. Suddenly, the female captain rushed in to capture him, but he transformed to fight back. He created a copy to use as a foothold to jump up and grab her. He wanted her to take him out of the wall, so she complied immediately. Subai had now come to find Bit to go out for a while. Arrow was lifted high and encountered the things that would protect the top of this wall. They could be considered seals keeping the wall solid and preventing anyone from escaping. Arrow stubbornly rushed up, but was attacked by her and kicked back down. Suddenly, a treasure chest was dropped, so he grabbed it to fly away. Subai was taken to meet 2 of the princess's close advisors. Both were ready to grant Subai asylum if he revealed the secrets of the Republic. He compromised but wanted to know how they had improved the female captain's ability to fly. If he could apply it, they could mass-produce it. Arrow, at this point, grabbed the treasure and was about to rush to where the people were when he was shot down by the female captain and captured. She brought Arrow back to the palace and was discovered by Bit. He had gone to observe as Subai had instructed and sent a signal to him. Subai made an excuse to return to the ship, and Bit had run to attack the guards. He was beaten back, but Subai managed to handle it himself. Arrow had been brought by the female captain to the old scientist for research. His purpose was to study how he could control the armor without needing faith. Subai had anticipated this and devised this plan. Now everything would depend on Bit's decision. If he shot the button correctly and released Arrow, they would live. If not, he would die, but Subai would still live with his own value. Bit shot correctly and helped Arrow escape. Subai threw a smoke bomb to help him escape. The female captain still rushed to attack him, but he took a sword from Subai to fight back and knocked off her mask, revealing that she was the princess. But not quite, as the princess seemed to have 2 different personalities. Subai was forced to throw a smoke bomb to help all 3 continue running. Subai suspected the princess had multiple personalities, and Bit didn't allow Arrow to fight back because if the princess got even a little scratch, they would all be expelled. Subai didn't have free time to think of a plan, and the female captain had personally come to stop the princess. She would do the princess's job herself so the princess could return. Arrow thought running was the best option, so he transformed and took both of them along. The female captain had to call back to report and deploy the plan. Atli now wanted to go help Arrow but was stopped by Elsha. Although she knew Elsha had stabilized her mentality, half of her mind was still very confused with the sudden loss of homeland, and then wandering on a ship. only to end up being pushed to become the new village leader. Now if Atli left, she would be alone. Suddenly, both discovered Arrow and the female captain fighting out there. Arrow was carrying Subai and Bit, so he couldn't split himself and had to enlarge his arm to grab her. Suddenly, he lost his fighting form, and the female captain had also taken off her ring to directly deal with him. But the doctor ran to stop her. The female captain was his younger sister, and he had left the empire because he himself had caused the princess to have multiple personalities as she does now. He was looking for a way to cure the princess and needed Sue's brain to do that. Arrow was someone who could defeat others' beliefs without killing them, but he didn't know what purpose Bit served. However, the female captain still stubbornly clung to her faith and had to watch helplessly as Arrow's group escaped. The doctor had taken them to the underground sewer and decided to tell them everything. 5 years ago, the king died and there were 40 heirs, but the current princess was chosen. The princess loved to practice flying, so the female captain often used hang gliders to fly with her. Until one time, the doctor mistakenly shot and caused both to fall. He thought they were being attacked by birds, so he shot. He knew it was his fault. The princess developed multiple personalities from then on, but only when near both of them. His sister also began trying to harm him, so he decided to leave to find a way to cure the princess. Meanwhile, the king of the Republic had returned. He saw through all the schemes of his close advisor, but still thought he was useful, so he kept him. He then went to meet Kai and saw that he had trained well over time, so he decided to release him. After that, the king organized the execution of the rebel clan leader he had just suppressed. The clan leader called him weak, so he gave him a ring and would fight himself. The other used armor while he only used an ordinary weapon, but that was enough for him to finish the other in one move. He then took advantage of the soldiers' excitement and decided to start invading the empire. Atli's entire village had now been captured because Arrow's group knew the princess's secret. The female captain had vowed to use everything to stay by and protect the princess. Suddenly, the Republic's king sent a message announcing that he would invade the day after tomorrow and gave them 1 day to surrender. The princess suddenly changed personalities and declared a challenge to him. She then called the scientists to urgently manufacture and improve armor for the soldiers. The evil personality had now taken control. This personality believed that the weak personality couldn't lead, so she would do it herself. She didn't allow anyone to disobey her words and told them to listen and do as she said. The news had quickly spread to the people. The doctor went to listen and came back to inform Arrow's group, but Subai realized he had been followed. The princess's secretary appeared to attack when suddenly a clown appeared and chased him away. This clown then led all four to meet someone called the Master. All four were taken to a strange palace and met the person called the Supreme Choice. This person was one of the 6 leaders of the empire and had the role of choosing the true heir. He knew who Arrow's group was, but Arrow didn't like this guy at all, so he stepped up to him, suddenly activated his power, and blew him away. He had a ring in him, but he was never allowed to use all of its power because it was too great. Therefore, he indulged in pleasure to make himself depressed and lazy, because if he were serious, this world would perish. The secretary from earlier had also been brought here. He didn't let the palace touch Arrow's group because they were his guests. He was the one who had chosen the current princess and brought other candidates here for entertainment. They were all turned into slaves, but that was better than being killed. When the princess had an accident before, he had donated blood to her and helped her become suitable for the throne. That was probably part of the reason why the princess developed a second personality. The second reason the secretary came here was to report that Elsha was about to be executed. The princess wanted to execute her to take the ring from her to control the ship, or her villagers would die. But the princess also gave her a choice to cut off one leg, because she only needed one of her legs to attach to the ship to start it. Arrow and the whole group had run away at this point, but were blocked by the captain's soldiers, so Arrow had to transform to get through. He ran but was blocked midway. Elsha had requested a duel to win freedom for the villagers, and the captain accepted the challenge because she was confident she wouldn't lose. Both transformed, and obviously Elsha was still at a disadvantage. Arrow had now awakened new powers and grown wings to fly to Elsha. The female captain was about to use her final move to finish Elsha, but Arrow arrived. He was about to fight instead, but Elsha wanted to fight herself. so he transformed into a sword for her to use. But he was too heavy, making it difficult for her to use. He created a thruster behind the sword, causing her to spin around. Just as she rushed in, Arrow pulled Elsha up for her to deliver a decisive blow. Seeing the female captain being hit, the princess worried she might die, but anyone defeated by Arrow doesn't lose their life. The princess returned and began to renege, and even took out the transformation ring to execute the villagers. Su Bai mentioned that she was chosen for the supreme blood sacrifice, and the captain was unaware of this. However, Elsha attempted to bring the princess back to her senses. The original personality once again stood up strongly and sealed the dark personality inside her ring. She then realized that war was inevitable and decided to evacuate the people. Elsha offered to ally with her to fight against their common enemy. The king had now entered the battle and was boosting the morale of all the soldiers. He was called a dirty old man and was very excited whenever he had an opponent. Meanwhile, the princess was worried about whether she could govern better than her other self. Su Bai and the doctor were collaborating to create artificial rings to increase their fighting power. They succeeded with the theory and needed to adjust these artificial rings to perfect them. As a fee, Su Bai took a few. The princess called Atli and Elsha to confide in them. The two girls helped the princess become more confident in herself. During the meeting, Arrow also chose to stay with everyone because he couldn't leave them to play with the wall. After discussion, Su Bai said that the king would surely attack the strongest area of the empire, so he needed the empire to concentrate troops there. For the weakest flank, he would send warships for defense. As the battle was about to begin, the warships set sail, leaving the people behind. The village elder no longer wanted to be involved with the doctor, tired of being toyed with by the nobility. The captain met her brother again and gave him a ring if he still intended to fight. The Republic then officially attacked the Empire's strongest area. The small fry weren't worth mentioning, but the two generals were notable. One had armor that looked like a dragon with attack speed equal to lightning, and the other general that Arrow had faced before was well known. The captain and her team rushed out to deal with these two generals. On Arrow's side, Su Bai wanted Arrow to change his dream. He wanted him to unify this world and become the leader of both countries. With those resources, he could easily destroy the wall. His group encountered their greatest enemy, Kai. Kai and Ren transformed together, forcing Arrow to descend to confront them. He rushed to attack Kai but was blocked by Ren. Kai passed through, and Su Bai needed Elsha to stay put and steer the ship. The small fry who approached were all shot down by Su Bai. Arrow tried to get past Ren by using clones to deceive her and then using his wings to fly away. He dragged Kai into the sky and dropped him for Su Bai to shoot at repeatedly, as Kai couldn't dodge in the air. He kept repeating this, pulling Kai up for Su Bai to shoot, causing Kai to think Su Bai was a coward. He then took his sword and rushed to finish Kai, but Ren stood in the way. She lost her armor and jumped onto him to embrace a suicide bomb. He had to remove his ring to disable her detonator. He was stabbed in the hand, but also punched her to bring her to her senses. He then transformed into a sword for Atli to use. She spun around and threw him to sweep away the enemy troops. Kai had also fallen due to receiving too many shots. On the other battlefield, the fight was still intense, and the king used a dirty trick by sneaking a bite on the captain, causing her to be thrown back to the palace. Hearing that Kai had lost, he decided to retreat. Su Bai blamed Arrow for not dealing with Kai, but he wanted Kai to survive so that when he became the unifier, he would consider him a friend. Kai later woke up in camp, still bitter about losing. Arrow was taken back to have his hand bandaged. Su Bai explained to him a bunch of theories about something called belief particles and informed him that his hand injury would now make it harder for him to fight. If he wasn't careful, he could kill others instead of just destroying their rings. When strategizing, they planned to lure the Republic into a mountain pass to attack, intending to crush the king with falling rocks. The people then protested against the war, forcing the princess to appear to reassure them. They chose to trust her, while the captain felt ashamed of this defeat. At this moment, Ren was training with the general when the king came looking for her. Knowing she was eager to become stronger, he tied her up and threw her into a waterfall to make her survive on her own. She managed to surface and used her mouth to cling to tree roots. Bit wanted to do something at this time and asked Su Bai for a ring, but he wanted to learn how to use the ship's cannons first. Suddenly, Arrow arrived and asked why Subai had to try so hard to win. The next morning, the entire warship had managed to flank the Republican forces, but they were not easily stopped. Once again, Kai appeared alone and transformed, but he was still injured, so Atli attacked first and let Arrow shoot into the sky for Bit to fire. Kai was shot down and left for some soldiers to finish off. Arrow's group then advanced to assist the remaining flank. The captain at this point had begun to feel slightly intimidated in the king's presence. Ren had returned and had an awakening, so the king gave her another ring. She then went back to find Kai. Kai was being beaten by some soldiers and thought this would be the end of his journey when Ren arrived. She now had new powers and wanted Kai to use her wings to fight, but Kai still had his overwhelming pride and didn't want to. Ren punched him to make him throw away that dignity and fight with everything he had, just as Subai was doing. He too had an awakening and decided to merge with Ren to don the wings and give chase. The captain was nearly exhausted when the warship arrived to support. Arrow was about to attack when Kai found him. Kai believed he was now no less than Arrow. He knocked him out of the sky and then rushed to attack Elsha. She was separated from the ship, rendering it inoperable and now useless for the battle. Arrow decided to use all his strength to fight him, but just as he was about to use the sword in his hand, it suddenly malfunctioned. Ren realized this could be due to the wound she had caused, but even so, neither of them would show Arrow any mercy, so he also decided to go all out against both of them. The two girls down there were now facing two veteran generals, while Arrow could only use his hands against Kai's blade. He retreated to gain momentum and charged at Arrow when the commander stepped in to block the blow for him. The two girls were now being supported by two loyal subordinates of the captain, both apologizing for misunderstanding and imprisoning them. The captain saw that Arrow seemed to be struggling with his arm and told him to fly up. He understood and followed, as Kai and Ren had no idea what was waiting for them in the sky. They both looped back and pushed Kai and Ren into the limited objects in the sky, and the captain wanted to seize the opportunity to finish them off. But Arrow feared killing both of them, so he held back, allowing them both a chance to escape. Subai had told him to transform into a sword for the captain to use, which he did. Thus, the battle between the four merged beings was about to begin. Suddenly, the princess discovered that the battle was being broadcast to the people. The one broadcasting it was the supreme choice. Suddenly, Kai and Ren separated, forcing Arrow to transform back into a robot to chase after Ren. Kai had thrown a wire to grab the captain's leg and electrocuted her, shocking her. Arrow had to dive down to support her and drag Kai elsewhere, leaving the two women to deal with each other. Bit now had to control the ship himself because Elsha was no longer there to steer it. The princess decided not to just sit and watch anymore, but to join the battlefield. She was confident she could suppress that dark nature. Arrow had taken Kai up to the blue sky and wanted Kai to come to his senses and understand Subai. The reason Subai betrayed everything was because he wanted to see the entire vast world, to see the other side of the wall and to know who had built them and sent Arrow here. However, Ren rushed in to attack and merged with Kai once again. They threw Arrow down to the ground, believing that a selfish person who only wanted to return outside the wall like him couldn't understand how the people were suffering. He was about to finish him off when the princess suddenly appeared. She came before Kai, and no matter what he did, he couldn't attack her. She used her power to heal all the allies and help Arrow return to the battle. The people were overjoyed, but the Emperor also saw that it was now time for him to enter the battle. He took 10 rings at once and put them on, then rushed straight into the battlefield. As our troops were cornering the enemy into the mountain pass, the Emperor arrived and found the place too narrow, so he waved his hand once, causing both sides of the mountain to be blown away. Their bomb plan had failed, and now they had to face this monster themselves. The captain rushed to attack but was tightly gripped by him. Arrow tried to rescue her, but both were thrown away. He swung again, and the entire group behind them flew away, leaving only the princess. She had recovered Arrow and the captain, but he advanced straight towards her, wanting her evil nature to return. She was constantly pressured and again lost control to that evil self. She declared she would make this dirty old man regret provoking her. Bit saw that the situation was now very unstable, as the ship couldn't move and the princess had gone mad here. Subai still said nothing, proving he must be very focused on finding a solution. The princess began to attack. and the king could only raise shields to defend. His rings gradually broke. Due to his great belief, quantity had to compensate for quality. The princess drilled her foot into a drill and pierced through the shield layer, forcing him to lick her shoes as she had declared before. But he was still laughing and then absorbed her sword and even one of her legs. The captain wanted to help the princess but was blocked by Kai. Everyone else also had their own opponents, so the princess now had to fend for herself. The princess then rushed towards the area where soldiers from both sides were fighting. She kept smashing both enemy and friendly troops to absorb power. The people found the princess too frightening, but others couldn't do anything because this was decided by the supreme choice. Arrow saw that the captain kept losing focus, so he told her to hold Kai back while he went to rescue the princess instead. He split himself to block the old king and rushed to block the princess's face, then launched a move at her. The transmission was suddenly cut off, and the people began to lose faith when they saw that side of the princess. The Supreme allowed the transmission to reopen, and the princess had been brought back to her benevolent nature by Arrow. Subai had spoken, meaning he had finished strategizing. Subai called for everyone to pretend to retreat because he had a plan that needed Arrow and Elsha as the key. Both returned to the ship first and waited for everyone to retreat. Subai turned the ship 180 degrees and then ordered to prepare the cannon. Arrow became the energy source to combine with a cannon, and the enemy stood in formation just as Subai had hoped. Just one cannon shot combined with Arrow's power caused the enemy troops to lose almost all their rings and could no longer fight. However, Kai and Ren flew in the sky and dodged, and the Emperor was still standing firm. Arrow tried to give them a way out, but the Emperor urged them to rush up and fight with conventional weapons. They weren't cowards and charged forward, forcing the captain and her people to respond. Arrow tried to tell Kai to stop the soldiers because this was meaningless sacrifice, but Subai told him not to bother explaining because these people lived by ideals, not reason. But the princess stood up to recover them. She didn't want more bloodshed, so she would heal until they gave up the intention to attack. Others followed her and ran up to help. The Emperor was also recovered by her and also reached his limit and returned to being human. He ordered a ceasefire and admitted defeat. The two generals still wanted to fight, but Kai stopped them because this was the Emperor's will. The two sides then shook hands, negotiated, and decided to return to their homes. Arrow and everyone prepared to repair the ship a bit before going home as it had used up all its energy to fire that last shot. The princess and the captain had gone back first. She planned to let the people know about her second personality, but as soon as she arrived, she was stoned by the people because they thought that evil personality was her true nature. Arrow's group was now celebrating victory, and the girls were planning to return to the wall, but now they couldn't do anything about it. So Subai still hoped Arrow would consider the idea of becoming king. The captain had to take the princess away from the angry crowd because they didn't know where they got transformation rings from. Atli now felt quite useless in the battle, but Elsha thought she was always the first to act, so she shouldn't underestimate herself like that. The princess had blamed the captain for pulling her away without letting her explain. The doctor and two courtiers also ran up and informed that the people had broken into his laboratory to steal transformation rings, and the princess didn't allow them to harm the citizens. The captain then learned that it was the Supreme who had leaked this information. As the princess wanted to go explain to the people, she suddenly fainted. After being taken to her room, the captain realized the princess was also injured. Subai now needed more than a day to restore the ship. Suddenly, they were attacked by a strange robot. Arrow had to go out to deal with it, but they couldn't see the complete form of the opponent. Arrow split himself to hold it back, but the attacker disappeared. Meanwhile, the people were staging a coup, forcing the princess to come out and explain. The captain escorted the princess, and as she was about to speak, Arrow's robot flew in and began trampling people. Some people died, forcing the captain to take action, but this Arrow flew away, revealing it was the clown impersonating him. The princess's courtiers all knew who was behind this plot. She then created a puppet to go inside and incite people about the princess bringing the heretical Arrow group into the country. So now they were hunting the villagers. The princess couldn't calm the people, and the Supreme appeared, transforming into his most handsome form and communicating with the people. He said he would strip the princess of her title and let the people execute her. The captain stopped the people, but the secretary had people arrest the princess. As the captain wanted to take the princess away, she was blocked by that clown. The princess was thus captured, while the doctor went to find the Supreme. He revealed his purpose was to continue causing war, not liking the princess's style of peace. It was also he who had made the doctor misaim and shoot the princess off the glider. He activated his bracelet and tried to resist, but was beaten badly without missing a hit. Finding no way out, he fled as the best option. The princess was about to be executed when Arrow arrived in time to save her. He also knew about being impersonated thanks to the doctor's report. Subai was working 10 times as hard to repair the ship. Arrow wanted to find the villagers while the clown would be dealt with by the captain. The doctor was bringing the building where the villagers were sheltering to the ship when he was stabbed by the people. He tried to take the villagers as far as possible and stood back to block, but was stabbed repeatedly. Arrow came to handle the villagers, but the doctor couldn't be saved anymore. He warned the princess to be careful of the Supreme and then passed away. The secretary came to demand the princess back, as this was an internal national affair, but Atli declared that her ship and people were also an independent country, and she wouldn't let their benefactor, the princess, come to harm. From then on, 2 months passed. No one knew why no treasures had fallen for 2 whole months. At the same time, the Republic's military power had decreased significantly. But above all, they were officially recognized as an independent country by the 2 major countries. Atli was made queen because 2 months ago, the Supreme had ordered them to leave as he wanted them to become an independent country. The more countries, the bigger the war would be. The ship then chose a place to settle and produce agriculture. The people were no longer hungry, and everyone was thinking about who should be the ruler. Everyone had their own reasons to refuse, so Atli was chosen. After some time of reflection, the Supreme decided to speak to the people again to end the boredom. On that day, the signing ceremony took place right on this ship. The King of the Republic was invited. The Secretary, now the Emperor of the Empire, also came to participate. The president from before was also invited and couldn't believe this once rejected village had grown so large. When entering, the Emperor of the Empire showed clear contempt for the princess, now a council member named Fine. The captain informed that the vassals present here had all chosen to be under their country, so if any country intended to attack, they would protect these vassals. The armored division previously under her command would once again follow her and leave the empire. The teenage boy's Arrow had helped before also came here to help. Other vassals continuously flattered them. Meanwhile, the 2 generals in the Republic were having soldiers trained to fight robots barehanded, as they had lost most of their rings and their military power had significantly decreased. Kai was also forced to change. He had to sit at a desk to research belief particles, hoping to find a way to activate battle armor without the ring. Besides discovering that Arrow's awakening would be the destruction of humanity, he found something else. But just then, Arrow and Subai arrived. The 2 generals and Ren wanted to fight, but the Chancellor stopped them. The Chancellor's role was second only to the king. Subai wondered where the fat Chancellor from before was, and it turns out he had fled with money when he saw the Republic lose the battle. As he was escaping, he accidentally fell into the hands of the clown, who informed him that he had been chosen by the Supreme. When Subai entered, he began negotiations and wanted a part of the Republic's land in exchange for peace. Ren refused and thought this was a threat, but Arrow believed she was being too rash. She thought Subai dared to come here knowing she hated him without preparing anything. Subai took out the bombs he had planted before leaving to threaten her, as she wasn't sure if she had found all the bombs. Subai puffed up his clothes and pushed her away. Kai also told her to stop because she was making herself look bad. On Atli's side, the signing ceremony was still going smoothly. Kai asked Subai about the reason he risked danger to come back here for land, and he said he needed territory, but Kai knew it was an excuse. Because the text recorded that when the ship of destiny awakens in the land of destiny, everything will return to nothingness. It must be referring to their ship and Arrow. The rest of the text had been torn, and Kai suspected Subai was the one who did this. Subai didn't say anything, so the Chancellor used the fact that the Emperor was at the signing ceremony and could massacre everyone himself as a threat. As for the reason to wage war, they just needed Ren to kill this Chancellor, and they could blame Arrow and Subai. Knowing he was set up, Subai had to reveal that what was hidden in the land he wanted to take was another warship, Just as he finished speaking, explosions occurred, but they weren't caused by Subai. Another warship appeared, and the old chancellor was the one controlling it. He was Tai, and he declared that from now on, the Republic would be under his control. Elsha and Bit were about to leave when they accidentally met a mysterious person who said he came from outside the wall. The Tai had begun sweeping across the Republic. The king found it amusing and declared the signing ceremony over, bidding farewell until the battlefield. Everyone else left, but Arrow wanted to rush into battle. He attacked the cockpit, but the enemy didn't leave it exposed as they had. He fired back, and Atli called Arrow to discuss the mysterious person they just met, so Arrow had to return. Seeing Arrow retreat, the enemy declared that the Republic now stood no chance against him, and anyone who wanted to join him was welcome. The Chancellor was forced to let the soldiers choose their own sides to minimize bloodshed. The mysterious girl found by the Elsha group claimed to be a follower of the Lin faith. The founder of this faith wanted Arrow to tell the world the truth soon. He would have to go to the sacred mountain range outside the wall. They would give him a way to get there, so Arrow would go. The girl then turned to dust. Subai examined it and knew she was created from faith particles, but the battle armors worried Arrow. He was concerned that when he learned the truth, the world would be destroyed as prophesied. But Subai thought the world had already changed since Arrow's arrival, so it could be seen as destruction. Meanwhile, the Republic soldiers were trying to attack Tai. He fired at them, but the Emperor appeared and charged straight at his battleship. He fearfully opened fire, but the Emperor survived thanks to the ring he took from the President. When the ship flew higher, the Emperor created a bow, shot himself into the sky, and plunged down on Tai. He finished him off with one move and brought down the ship. He then informed the officials that there were more rings in the ship, so the Republic now had its own battleship. The Imperial King worried that the Republic would invade, but the Supreme kept assuring him to relax because the Republic's first target would be Arrow's country. He also received a box from the Supreme and immediately ordered the evacuation of citizens. When the people left, he activated it and pulled up another battleship from under the Empire, also aiming at Arrow. The Supreme sent a message to Arrow's ship, saying these were 2 gifts he was sending. Subai didn't know how the Supreme knew about the ship and why he chose this moment to rise up. However, now they only had to see what the Lin faith was to find answers. Arrow knew Subai wasn't sure earlier about whether he would destroy the world or not, but he had to say that to keep everyone from worrying. The next morning, the group reached near the wall, but the Imperial ship caught up, forcing the captain and her division to engage in battle. The other side released many soldiers who could all fly, but the group's purpose was only to buy time for Arrow. He stood ready at the bow of the ship, and Subai turned the ship and activated its upright mechanism. The cannon was now larger and fired an unavoidable beam of light. This was the result of Subai's 2 months of research to counter the flying enemies. It swept a straight line and then rotated to both sides, completely clearing the Imperial forces. The ship, having lost its faith particles, could no longer fly. And so Arrow's group continued towards the wall, and another disciple appeared, telling them to go straight through the wall. Indeed, the wall let them pass through, but on the other side was another wall. They passed through 3 walls consecutively. The Empire took out more rings to approach and examine the wall. Arrow's group was nearing the mountaintop, but there was a problem with the pillars. They were all skulls. Even the doctor's head was there. The captain ran to check, but someone told her not to touch it. This was the patriarch of the Lin faith. These faces represented the dead, and the higher the pillar, the closer that soul was to heaven. The patriarch wanted Arrow to remember everything. He then used magic on him, making him writhe in pain. Others tried to help Arrow but were stopped. The Imperial ship had also passed through and was in pursuit. The group was about to turn back and fire when Arrow alone rushed into battle. The scars on his body began to heal, bringing him close to losing control. The Imperial King was still confident because Arrow couldn't kill people, but he lost his ring and his life. Arrow was extremely shocked after killing someone for the first time. Arrow tried to leave but was held back by an electric current. His power went out of control again, causing him to wipe out all the Imperial soldiers around. Everyone was shocked, while Arrow helplessly told the captain to run before he accidentally erased her too. Now they could be certain that Arrow was the one bringing destruction to the world. The patriarch was actually a jester sent by the Supreme. He had known who Arrow was from the beginning and did this to restore Arrow's inherent power, as he was a destroyer sent by God. The jester then lured Arrow to destroy more people. Thus, all the Imperial soldiers were annihilated by Arrow's hand alone. The Soul Mountain grew taller. The reason Arrow was brought here was because this place was closest to God. But he still maintained consciousness despite regaining his power. He tried to remove the ring, but his body resisted. He fired a shot at the ship, but managed to self-destruct that attack in time. He told everyone to shoot him down because he didn't want to see everyone die. He had saved them time and again, but this time he couldn't. Everyone pleaded with Subai because he always had a solution. Under pressure, Subai told everyone to fire at the ship's bow to cut off Arrow's energy source and told him to go far away to avoid harming anyone while they found a way to fix him. The captain went out, and Finey wanted to follow, but the captain stopped her because Finey still couldn't fly. They were blocked by the jester, so Atlee went out to tie her feet for the captain to launch a full-force attack. She was forced to retreat, and Bit shot down the ship to let Arrow go. He flew away while Subai wanted to return and head to the mountain for information. But the Supreme had built a wall preventing them from passing. Subai again faced pressure on what to do next, and this was the first time we saw Subai lose composure to this extent. But Bit saved Subai by keeping the ruins from the execution village here, including the box that sent Arrow to them. Arrow had gone very far and was trying to remove the ring by any means possible. There was still no movement from the ship. Their communication with Arrow had been cut off, so for now, they could be sure the Supreme wouldn't pay attention to them. Arrow had reached the border of the Republic and accidentally killed people there. Those on the ship were still worried about opposing God, but they had faced many strong opponents before, so there was nothing to worry about. Bit believed Subai had a strategy. Of course he did, and he needed Finey's help. The King of the Republic had met the Supreme again and was informed about God. He didn't care who the Supreme's God was and only saw this wall as the only God. He decided to defeat him and overthrow what he called God. He then handed over control of the ship to the Chancellor, and the ship took off. Atlee and Elsha had brought food to the villagers, and they now fully trusted both after all that had happened. The wall was gradually being lowered. Arrow was trying to control himself to avoid harming more people. As soon as the wall was completely lowered, Subai's group continued their journey. Bit approached Subai to complain about his uselessness, but Subai had a very important task for him. Arrow had reached the height limit and was trying to surpass it. He saw a treasure drop hole and entered, but before he could orient himself, he was pulled out by the jester. She threw him down, and he fell right in front of the Republic's ship. The king was about to deal with Arrow for being God's hunting dog when the captain asked them to stop. Subai's group had arrived. Subai negotiated with the king, wanting to prove he also had the power to confront him. With his inherent bellicose nature, the king agreed to let Subai face Arrow. He allowed Subai to prove his strength, and if he could defeat Arrow, the king would be the next opponent. Subai's group could now relax as the king wouldn't interfere. Finey would charge the cannon. The captain's two subordinates attacked the princess so she could absorb and redirect it towards Arrow, but he still managed to block it. However, Finey succeeded in approaching him and letting her other personality grab and squeeze his hand, causing him to shatter and return to human form. Finey had persuaded her other self to help fight together. He could meet Subai again and reach out for Subai to grab, but even though he wasn't in robot form, he could still make Subai disappear. Arrow panicked and wouldn't let anyone near him, then decided he would destroy the Supreme One himself. As he flew away, the clown woman tried to follow, but Finey asked the captain to run back to the Empire to save the people before the Supreme One targeted them. When the clown woman tried to follow, Ren rushed in to stop her. Both she and Kai wanted to deal with her to avenge Subai. Kai realized how wrong he was to underestimate Subai's aspirations, but he also felt sorry for Subai being killed by the very goal she pursued. Kai kept attacking, causing the clown woman to shatter into pieces and explode. At this point, everyone was at a loss without Subai and Arrow, as they had been too dependent on both. But Bit took out the ring Subai had given him, saying that even without those two, they must act because they had grown stronger, and they'd rather face God than continue living in poverty. so the whole group set off to return to the Empire to confront the Supreme One and evacuate the people. The captain had reached the Empire and told the people to flee, but they no longer trusted her or the princess, so she had to use force to scare them away. She encountered the Supreme One, who thought it was more interesting to let humans struggle in despair. He revealed how he had framed her brother, enraging her to attack, but she was completely blocked. He saw that she was just like her brother when learning the truth. She frantically rushed at him and was repeatedly knocked away. When she used her cannon to shoot, he blocked it and grabbed her. Just as he was about to crush her, Arrow arrived to rescue her. He was going to use his power to destroy him, but he saw dying at the hands of God's messenger as a blessing. However, he couldn't hit him at all, making him more arrogant and believing God didn't want him dead yet. He was locked down, and the Supreme One wasn't free to play with the captain because his honored guests had arrived the Republic's warship. The king had people take out hundreds of rings, and he alone wore more than 20 on his body before rushing out to fight with his entourage. Although everyone could fly now, Kai still kept Ren by his side. The Supreme One had Arrow attack the king, but he could block his disintegration beam and even knock him away. When the Supreme One had Arrow shoot beams everywhere, the Emperor deflected them all back at him. He had to call out several arms to block, and Arrow wanted the king to finish him off because after losing Subai, he didn't care anymore. The king strangled him, and his body gradually disappeared like Subai's, but in the end, he was reborn with a youthful body holding Arrow's sword. He decided to use God's own weapon against God's servant. The Supreme One was forced into a serious fight. He took out his ring and transformed it into battle armor, but he also created a warship for himself. His warship continuously fired shots around, bombarding a large area. But in this difficult situation, Fai arrived and revived everyone. However, this was still not enough against the Supreme One. He activated a barrier field surrounding the warship, and in this difficult situation, Bit stepped forward and took out the ring Subai had left behind. The ring enlarged and merged with the warship, transforming their ship into a giant robot. Bit had been trusted by Subai because he always united everyone together. While Bit dealt with the arms of the other warship, Fai took the opportunity to revive everyone. Her ability seemed convenient but directly harmed her as she had to endure pain to heal. The king, determined not to let her efforts go to waste, charged in to where the Supreme One was hiding to drag him out. He blocked the attack and detached himself from the warship to enjoy the battle. The king realized he was connected to the warship by wires, indicating a link between them. Everyone rushed to attack the wires, but they were unusually hard. The two generals and Kai couldn't even scratch them. The king was being whipped incessantly by the Supreme One, forcing Fai to constantly recover. But the Supreme One had attacked with a wide area technique to suppress her recovery ability and also to see how long she could endure. Bit came up with a bold idea at this moment. He decided to merge the two battleships together to create a stronger and larger robot. Everyone could feel this power. Bit believed this was the reason Subai always wanted battleships, and the power from the combined battleships was enough to break the wires. Simultaneously, Bit also fired a barrage of missiles at him. The king thought he was still bound by the rules of this place, so they could still win. He and Arrow rushed forward, and he saw that he was being gradually destroyed by Arrow, but still had to use faith to recover. He wanted Arrow not to listen to his nonsense and just charge ahead. He activated the thrusters behind the sword and rushed with him to push him back. The king used his special technique of shooting himself like an arrow again and flew straight into him. But he thanked him because he had intentionally allowed himself to be stabbed in order to release Arrow back to his original form. He grew spikes and stabbed the king. He could only apologize. As others wanted to rush in, the clown woman had returned because she had the ability to regenerate until this world ended. But the Emperor refused to go easily. He fell onto the Supreme One's body and decided that even if he died, he would take his power with him. He stabbed once and pulled out all the rings from his body, leaving a final message for his descendants before passing away. The barrier around the Supreme One completely disappeared. The Supreme One's ship then exploded. That afternoon, everyone stood before the ruins, hoping that they could give the king a proper funeral later. They had searched all day but couldn't find Arrow and the two villains anywhere. Suddenly, the kids at the farm called to report that they were seeing Arrow going around destroying things. He was now completely hopeless and helpless as no one could stop him anymore. Kai flew there to find him, confident that he was fully capable of taking him down. He then rushed in to fight and was able to block his disintegration beam thanks to what he had learned from the king. He also had a skill he had learned himself, which was creating a dark sphere and throwing it at Arrow. This sphere turned his body to stone, preventing him from recovering. He threw multiple spheres continuously at Arrow, and he felt that he could finally die. But suddenly, in some magical way, a portal appeared and Subai jumped out from it. However, this Subai was as large as 2 battle armors. He did something and helped Arrow regain control and transform back into a human. Kai wanted to know who this Subai was because Subai would never be this big. Actually, this was Subai's faith form, while the real Subai was on the ship. 3 days ago, when Bit came to find Subai, he had shown Bit what he was researching. It was a device that allowed him to transform into a material form like the battle armors, and he would take a gamble to see if Fai Ni could completely save Arrow or not. If not, he would let himself be disintegrated and sent up to God to see what he could discover. He had only told this to Bit, and if he didn't return after 3 days, he needed Bit to pull the plug to bring him back here. Subai had returned, and Bit told him to come out here to resolve things because the Republic's people wanted to take Arrow back for trial due to his involvement in the king's death. Arrow was ready to face punishment for killing too many people. Atlee disagreed and wanted to reclaim Arrow. However, that stubbornness could lead to a war. But 2 boys came and informed that this was their territory, and they demanded Kai to release the person. Seeing the tense situation, Subai offered a condition that he would reveal the secret of the world to the Republic in exchange for Arrow. They then boarded the ship for dinner, and Ren kept standing nearby to closely monitor Arrow. He told her if she wanted, she could just stab him quickly. After things settled down, Subai began to explain the nature of this world. Basically, this is one world among countless ones created by God. They have many large and small branches dividing out, and their world is also a small branch. All worlds lead to a common point, which is God's world. God collects power particles created by the worlds to maintain life. Basically, God needs to eat their faith to live. The things they saw outside the wall were actually the faith of the dead concentrated in one place for the gods to absorb. Any world showing abnormal behavior would be considered a threat and eliminated, meaning that now that Arrow was no longer the destroyer, God would make the next move. Everyone decided to fight even God to protect this world. Fai Ni still wanted to try using words to persuade, but everyone knew well enough that the Supreme One would not listen. Subai further revealed that the molten metal under the rock they used for propulsion was actually a sensor. If Subai could deceive that sensor, perhaps they would have their next move. Subai then came up with the idea of trying to go back outside the wall to see what would happen, because that place was where faith was sent to God. But how would they get out of the world when there were devices limiting altitude in the sky? Arrow remembered that when he entered the treasure gate, he saw a space outside, and based on this reasoning, Subai could predict that the location he had reached was a tube leading to God's area. The 2 boys proposed an alliance between countries as they now all shared the common goal of protecting this world from the deities. They were concerned about Arrow returning there and possibly regaining his destructive power, which was still possible, but the chance of their world being destroyed was even higher. Arrow wanted to know the reason for his memory loss and his desire to return to the other side of the wall, but Subai hadn't figured that out yet. Arrow had killed too many, and now he didn't know what he should do. Kai thought that if he was like that, he might as well die. He challenged him as a man. He then took out his sword to duel with Arrow, who was unarmed. The captain didn't let Fai Ni intervene because this was a duel of honor. Kai then charged at Arrow, who dodged. He didn't understand why Arrow wanted to die, but was now dodging to cling to life. He found Arrow too indecisive. He called him the one who killed the king and told him not to blame the Supreme One. He then attacked relentlessly, but Arrow still defended unconsciously. He didn't understand his own actions until he realized that the reason for him to live was the friends he had met. Kai, seeing that he was fighting back, drew out the king's weapon to attack him, but he blocked it barehanded. He now understood the reason he fought alongside them despite being the destroyer, that it was the strong will to survive of the people he met that had changed him. Thanks to them, he had become who he was today, and now he would bear the lives of all those who had fallen. He fought with Kai for a while before Kai walked away. The two girls rushed to hug him, and he was confident that he had returned to his former self. He pretended not to remember Bit, but how could he forget the person who had given him this name? Kai met Subai again and thought Subai would see his recent action as a test for Arrow, but Subai was also testing Kai. Because after the king's passing, he wanted Kai to ascend to the throne. He believed it would happen and gave Kai the things he had prepared if it did. Kai also realized that Subai was hiding his old scar. Kai would help Subai fulfill the big dream he desired. Ren also came to find Subai, and he saw that her sneaking skills had improved. They were determined to defeat even God to assert their position in this world. The group then set out to go to the mountain outside the wall. When they reached the wall, they easily passed through it without any obstacles. Feini already knew about what had happened to the doctor and how he had been wronged before. The army then took a minute to pay respects to those who had sacrificed themselves here. The Supreme One appeared once again. He would live until the world was destroyed. Since this place had been abandoned by God, he no longer needed to spare the energy of faith here. He then summoned a treasure, but this one spiraled into the earth and pulled the wall towards the center to sweep away this entire world. He wanted them to witness the destruction of everything they loved. He then absorbed the pillars of faith to create a sword. He was trying to provoke them, but they weren't easily trapped, so he threw the sword and pinned them to the ground. Subai told everyone to remove their rings to escape, but the Supreme One's spear controlled their bodies, making it impossible for them to escape. He declared to the whole world that this was the punishment for opposing God. While Kai's Republic army was fighting the clown woman and trying to stop the machine destroying the world, Arrow here used his power to separate the spear back into towers. Everyone joined forces to blast away the Supreme One and then turned back to stop that weapon. They couldn't make it stop, and the Supreme One had returned to disrupt them. He had returned to his true form and called out the battleship. Subai realized this could be stopped because otherwise, he wouldn't need to stop them. Subai told Arrow to combine with Kai while the battleship would deal with the Supreme One. Arrow transformed into a sword and told Kai to use the black hole like before. He had learned the Emperor's technique and activated the bow to shoot Arrow. He amplified Kai's technique and nullified that weapon, but the Supreme One called out another one. Subai instructed Arrow and Kai to aim for the exit out of this world. They drilled a hole in it and flew straight out. The battleship followed while the others stayed to keep the Supreme One here. When they got out of the space, they saw many other weapons here and destroyed them all. Finally, they reached the wall separating them from the gods. Kai attacked, but it didn't budge. However, someone who looked like Arrow appeared and transformed to stop them. Meanwhile, the Supreme One was still tormenting the others, but his battleship suddenly shattered, proving that Arrow had managed to affect him. They rushed up to attack and destroyed his battleship, but his true form remained and fired back at everyone. He aimed at Feini, but the clown woman blocked the captain from coming to support. Arrow and the others at this point couldn't harm the god as he called out copies of other people. He revealed to them the true nature of everything. Humanity had actually migrated and been infected with a disease. Only one individual remained alive, and that child was the true god. God needed a large amount of faith to develop, so this world system was established. The reason they were being eliminated was because the king and humans had developed too strongly and threatened the system. They didn't understand why becoming strong was a crime. The group still tried to resist, so the god had to teach them a lesson. The god then cut off the faith system, preventing them from drawing energy to fight. Meanwhile, as Feini was in danger, Dark Feini and the king suddenly appeared. Both had died but hadn't been sent to God yet when he destroyed the mountain. When Arrow restored them from his spear, they had the power to return to fight. The division and the captain together defeated the clown woman once again. The king and Dark Feini knew they would soon disappear, so they would fight their hardest one last time. They then joined forces to trap both of these villains and shoot them out into space. The king and Dark Feini also flew after them because the doctor had told them that Arrow out there needed the power of faith. The Supreme One knew this was his end, so he would enjoy it. With energy regained, Subai told Bit to work. His faith had transformed the old god's copy battleship into power and unified everything. Arrow was also made larger, but the god also split himself and grew to match them. However, Arrow decided to help and nurture God to keep their world existing. As proof, he had turned a village into people who defeated the gods' pawns. They then joined forces and created an attack like a phoenix, destroying all of the gods' incarnations. But the god still hadn't fallen. However, God chose to believe and allowed Arrow to nurture it. Thus, the god disappeared as he was no longer necessary. They were then brought into God's domain and met that child. It had been sleeping for 2,000 years, and now it would give them the coordinates of their homeland. Arrow and Subai wanted to return it to its home. So, 1 month later, Arrow's group set out on a space journey, leaving the world's restoration to Kai and his people. Subai left Kai in Ren's care and then embarked on the journey to God's homeland, the third planet in the solar system, Earth.